then broke her hip. She can no longer cook for herself. She can no longer till her garden. And if she wasn't lucky to have children who have a job like me, she would still be on her bed. She wouldn't have got that operation because we didn't have health insurance. So, honorable members, health insurance, let it be a priority. You all know how difficult it is to meet those costs. So that's the justification. We don't have a system that takes care of those life cycle risks, but we are beginning. However, as an economy, we've been slowing down. You all know that we were very vibrant in the past, in the 2000s and the 1990s. We grew really high, but recently, in the last one decade, we slowed down quite significantly, and even poverty has increased. If you look at this graph, you can see we came from 37% of poverty headcount in 2002 to 19.7 in 2013. And then we went back. This 26.3 was because of COVID. But already we had started going up. You're hearing these messages because you're political leaders. People tell you and you see these things. The UNDP last year, in 2019, they conducted a study to assess vulnerability. They said 55% of households in Uganda, that's 22.7 million people, were highly vulnerable to poverty in 2020, mostly because of climate shocks. And because of COVID, approximately 3.1 million people, in addition to the 8 that were poor, fell into poverty. The World Bank, in its economic update of 2020, said that our growth is increasingly less inclusive because its impact on poverty reduction appears to have declined. So that's why people are complaining. The economy is still growing, but it's not pulling so many people out of poverty. Because yes, we're getting out of a very deep pit, but there is a limit to what growth or the trickle-down effect can do. It doesn't do very much unless you have a system. That's why OECD countries spend up to 30% of their GDP on social protection, because that is their poverty reduction system. Inequality in Uganda and poverty. So these are the poverty trends. I just talked about them. They've been declining, but they are going up. But I wanted to talk about inequality. These are our trends. So inequality increased a bit in 2009. It reduced in 2012, and it's been on an upward trend recently. You see these things with your eyes, honorable members. And it's also uneven across our region. So you can see the inequality across regions, this gap between, so this is Eastern. It actually has the lowest level of inequality. But in the urban centers, that's where the highest levels of inequality are. And they explain some of the conflict we see on the roads. We are beginning to discriminate against each other because some of us are driving, others are walking, and we are seen as enemies. That's a threat to social cohesion. But most importantly, if I can speak as an economist, the IMF has estimated that inequality above 0.27 Gini coefficient hurts economic growth because a few people are carrying the economy. A few people are paying tax. Government is the biggest spender in Uganda, but only a few people are paying tax. So we don't have money to inject in the economy because a few people are paying tax. And that's the challenge with inequality. So we have to fix it. And social protection can be part of the solution. Honorable members, this is our income situation. This graphic basically shows that the vast majority of Ugandans live on very low incomes. And I would like you to have a look at this chart, honorable members. I would like your attention. If you use the international poverty line of $1.9 a day, more than 30% of people in Uganda were in poverty. That was 2016. So these are 2016 numbers. When you increase it to the threshold of 1.9, those who are above 1.9, between 1.9 and 3.2, up to 70% of Ugandans live in poverty. No wonder UBOS estimated in its statistical update of last year that between 2015 and 2019, 8.4% of households moved out of poverty, but 10 more households moved into poverty than those that came out. Because what's the difference between someone who is earning 45,000 and if that is the cutoff point for poverty and someone who is earning 46,000? Very little. So a very small shock and they're in poverty. So programs that target poverty itself are not very successful, especially because our incomes are quite low. How many Ugandans? By the way, I didn't talk about the Ugandan value. So $0.8 is 2,700 shillings a day. 70% of Ugandans live on 2,700 shillings a day. Honorable members, can we achieve the middle income status unless we do something radical? Because trickle down hasn't been doing it. Yes, we've invested in energy and electricity, but only a few people can use it. So we need to get more people to use this infrastructure and multiply our effects, our economy. This chart basically shows what happens between 2012 and 2014. People are always moving in and out of poverty because the incomes are quite low. So trying to target a poor person is almost a zero-sum game because people are poor today, tomorrow they are not. A large proportion of our people are vulnerable. I talked about climatic shocks, but most of this vulnerability is driven by informality also. A lot of Ugandans work in the informal sector, so they don't have secure jobs, they don't have medical insurance, they don't have access to NSSF, and of course, that's because social protection coverage is limited. Most of our people are smallholder farmers, so they are exposed to climate risks. This is a flooded hut, basically. This is a livelihood. So if you had planted beans or whatever it was and it flooded for days, you lost all your investment there. We have a lot of refugees. So we have so many people across the country. Those are refugee settlements. 1.4 million people. That shows how susceptible we are to conflict. If you live on the border of South Sudan, you know what's happening to our business people. It has happened in the Congo. It's happening in South Sudan. You know what has happened to Rwanda. So that's a source of risk. And I talked about Ugandans who are in the informal sector. So I want to zoom in. You can see who these people are. This chart shows that among non-wage earners, those 85% of farmers I talked about, 30% live below the poverty line. But if you double that poverty line, which is actually less than 30,000, you've got 46% of them. So add these two numbers, you can see 76% of it. And you can see how it's adding up to the statistic I showed there. So we have a high informal economy, and it's also driving this poverty because there is no system to address this poverty head-on as developed countries or countries with social protection systems are doing. And what does this mean? It means that many households are unable to make the investments they need to make to build the human capital of their children. Because if your children are malnourished, if they are not healthy, if they are not educated, then they are experiencing severe and irreversible damage right from birth. And that means as adults, already mentioned, they will earn less than people who are from wealthy or income secure families, and their productivity is hampered. So this is exactly what drives intergenerational poverty. It is not, honorable members, because these poor people are lazy or drunkards. I have not seen someone who works as hard as the guys that are offloading the trucks at Kalerwe and Busega Market. You know how much they do that for? They work hard but they are in the wrong business. So I've had a lot of people, including highly placed technical people, saying, you know, these poor people, they are very lazy. Let them go back to the village and work. They came here, first of all, because there was no productive work in the village. Everybody, I came to Kampala because I wanted a good life. And I got it. But not so many can do that. But we can help, because the only reason I did it was because my uncle took my father to school. That was his social protection. How many kids are not in school? I'm sure a lot of our children in this room are attending online classes. How many families can afford to buy a device? That's why these countries are giving people money. Because if you don't give people money, well, you will have malnourishment, you will have perpetual poverty, and you will also have the challenge of social cohesion. Very easy to attract people who are very poor. They have nothing to lose, literally. So we need to fix this problem. I mentioned that the poverty causes irreversible damage. And this is why. Because the greatest returns on a child's development happen between 0 and 2 years. This curve shows that progress in terms of memorizing numbers, the social skills, kids playing with others, language development, conceptualization, understanding things. You've seen kids who can't really understand things. You're talking to someone, but what's wrong with this person? If they don't achieve that ability before 2 years, they will never. And that person cannot be as productive as the people in this room. I read in the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty. I actually meant to quote that, but I didn't get a chance to do it. He said we should stop. I'm trying to remember the word he used, but we've normalized inequality, income inequality. And we're saying, you know, these people are poor because they don't work hard. They didn't go to school. They were climbing trees. And, you know, when you're a child of a family who doesn't understand education, your father is not educated, his father wasn't educated, there's nobody educated in the family, who is going to push you to go to school? My father, I remember one day, he rode his bicycle and I had to run with him because he understands the purpose of education. I had a headache and I stayed in bed. He found me, he woke me up, he rode his bike as I ran 3 kilometers. And then he was waiting for me with the headmaster and they canned me. A poor person can't do that because they probably want that child to stay home and help them with their garden. Child labor is prevalent in poor households. None of our children engages in child labor. I'm about to wind this down. I already made this point. This is called the Heckman curve. I already made the point. The best returns on children investment happen when they are young. So the point about this is that we need to invest in prenatal and early childhood investments, and social protection can actually do that because that's what gives us the greatest return. Honorable members, this is a picture from the cover of the NDP3. This is our Bombardier, I believe. I've seen beautiful pictures of factories, nice roads and trains. If we don't invest in a healthy, educated, and dynamic workforce and citizenry, all these investments in infrastructure are likely to generate limited returns. I already made that point earlier. Therefore, the point I'm making is let's invest in human capital through social protection, get a healthier citizenry, build an educated and adaptable workforce which can use the technology such as I am, who can, you know, build applications online and do things, be able to learn online so that we can contribute to a more dynamic economy, which enables more people to work in better jobs, open businesses, increase consumption, and that's how we become resilient in the face of shocks and have better access to financial services. And if we do that, we contribute to a more stable, cohesive, and dignified society. That's what it means to be a middle-income country. When you're stable, you're cohesive, everybody can see that they are benefiting from growth, and also contributing. Now, Uganda as a country has made a lot of progress in that direction because, as I mentioned, as Patrick introduced me, between 2010, the Ministry of Gender was implementing the Expanding Social Protection Program, and this program was aimed at embedding a social protection system. So through this program, I already mentioned it, they developed a policy. They've laid a very strong foundation, and these are opportunities for us to reduce this vulnerability and build our human capital through social protection. So you know about SAGE. I will not talk about it because it's in every district. If you're from northern Uganda and some parts of western Uganda, central, you know about NUSAF and Dr. Deep. But there are other programs. The government is actually working on a cash for work program for urban workers. It's under design. There is a child sensitive program in West Nile implemented by World Food Program. Save the Children is actually implementing part of that, and we are also designing other programs in other countries. We have started discussions on a shock responsive social protection system with development partners, and these are all important. Honorable members, I want to thank you for this. This chart shows how government's contribution to the SAGE program increased between 2014 and 15 and 2019. In 2014, SAGE's budget was only 9 billion. Today, I think, Patrick, correct me, Honorable Flavia, I think it's 107 billion. 107 from 9. So this is progress. You need to give your hands a clap because this is a major milestone that I can say this is the outcome of your work as members of Parliament, especially with support from the Parliamentary Forum. The Ministry of Gender has increased the value of the special grant for people with disabilities, and I already mentioned they are contemplating a disability and child grant. A lot of capacity has been built to deliver SAGE, which is, by the way, one of the most trusted programs of government because they invested in systems that manage fiduciary risk. They reach people. Remember, they were using mobile money. Nobody touches those people's money. It goes direct to the beneficiaries. But to do that, you need a system, and they built it. It's also available in NUSAF. They have so many things they've done that we can build on to have this life cycle social protection system. We've got funding from the government of Uganda I talked about, and our partners. But it's still a drop in the ocean. If you look at social protection spending, and this includes pension, so this is money that's spent on SAGE, NUSAF, some food for assets, and all different labor-intensive public works programs. But NSSF and the Public Service Pension Scheme, they are the ones. So what you see here as 0.6% of GDP, most of that is NSSF money and the Public Service Pension Scheme. That's less than 2 million people. The majority of our people are not benefiting. And this is the point I was making. Spending on direct income support is still less than 1% of GDP. Spending so little, only about 0.7%, 0.8% of GDP on social protection. Of course, you're very familiar with this picture. This shows our spending priorities as a country. We spend more, almost 20% on works and transport. These are up to 2019. These are from the budget framework paper. We spend 11% on security, 10% on education, 8% on health, 3% on agriculture, 0.7% on social development. And this is our people, literally, the majority of our people. So there's some homework for us to do there. This chart is basically to show that Uganda is almost negligible in terms of social spending compared to other countries. Lesotho is here. It's among the biggest spending, more than 2% of GDP. Kenya is spending something, I think, slightly higher than us of GDP. Tanzania also slightly. So Uganda, even among the peers, is spending much less on social protection, and that's not very good. I mentioned that the government of Uganda is forward-looking. So we have an opportunity to develop a long-term strategy which is under development now, and I would like to interest you, honorable members, to challenge the Ministry of Gender to involve you in this process, because we need to define our future together. This is not about the policymaker and the Ministry of Gender, it's about every Ugandan participating in this process, because we are defining the future for everybody across the life cycle. And so basically what this is saying is the different types of programs that we can invest in by 2030. They already started on these two, child disability benefit and adult disability benefit. But we can actually reform NSSF to offer family package, not just people taking their money out. Because once you take out the money now, 20%, sorry to burst some people's bubble, because I have a lot of money in NSSF, but I know that if that happens, the young people won't be able to get a family package. If you follow social insurance principles, you can achieve more with that money. But if you take it out as a lump sum, you're not able to do that. And that's some of the pain I have about the reforms at NSSF. But I understand, because there is no alternative, so we need to be thinking about alternative. This I will skip. This is basically the cost of the vision which I showed you. If we can do all these things, we can spend just about 1.5% of GDP. It can be done, because this is how you build a very cohesive society. I talked about shock response. Basically, shock response is about adopting the regular social protection system to deliver assistance whenever there is a shock, such as COVID, or a drought, or a crisis such as war. And we are having discussions in the Ministry of Gender and other stakeholders to build a system that can address to that. Under NUSAF, they have experimented with a disaster risk financing facility, and when there was drought in Karamoja, they saved a lot of money because people didn't have to sell their assets and things like that. So this is important. This chart basically is telling the story between 2014, when we had SAGE and a few others, but now there are so many programs. We have a policy, we have a single registry which can build on to register people, more government funding, and there's a long-term strategy under development. So we are on the right track, but we still have a lot of work to do. I already talked about what these benefits are. We can use social protection to build a higher income and secure nation through investing in our people's health, education, and social cohesion. These messages, I shouldn't belabor them, but they're important. I'll share these slides with you. Our incomes are very volatile. We have a level of vulnerability to shocks that's comparable to none in the region. So that's why the vast of our population keep falling in poverty. But we can support them to manage these shocks and build their human capital. We've laid a good foundation, but as I said, further investment is required, and we can count on you, honorable members, to shift the needle. That's in DJ speak. When you want to play another song, you shift the needle to something, the next song. So we are counting on you to shift the needle so we can cover more people with the social protection system, give a comprehensive list of social protection benefits. I thank you very much. We are very keen to support as Save the Children, to prioritize investments in children. We want governments all over the world to progressively move towards universal coverage of social protection. We know it takes time, but that is where we want to be going. If we have a long-term vision that's clear, we can actually lay a very good foundation for building this system. I thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, David, for very wonderful and elaborate presentation. And like he said, we are going to share the same with you so that you can be able to read at leisure. But also at the same time, this is one of the series of engagements that we are planning. So some of the things that may not be clear will be clarified as we move along. But I wanted to introduce the members of parliament who just joined us. My friend, Honorable Paul Akamba, thanks for coming. You can wave or stand up. Yes. Honorable Cyrus Algon. Yes. Honorable Cyrus Algon is the member of the Uganda Parliamentary Reform Social Protection Board. And then Honorable Arepe Moses. Thank you for coming. Is there anyone I've forgotten? Yes, Honorable Catherine and Mirama, a member of parliament from Kabale. And she's the member of the executive of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. And okay, microphone please. I have to admit that I'm not very familiar with your name, so so as we wait for that introduction, so introductions are very important because even amongst members of parliament, I know it's been a long process of getting to know one another and each other, so it's very important that we do that.
Morning, honorable members. I'm Boys Asawako, MP Budaka constituency.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Now,
morning, members and organizers. I'm Vyakatonda Abdu. I represent workers of Uganda.
Leisure. I think all of us have been introduced, or have introduced ourselves. Right. So we are almost coming to the end of this program. I was meant to make a presentation on the role of members of parliament in the social protection debate or engagement. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to simply summarize what I think are critical, modeled around the key functions that are attached to the office of the member of parliament. And one of them is legislation. Social protection interventions are very key. And in many cases, governments have gone ahead and embedded some of the key provisions in the social protection sector into law. And you are doing some of that work through the NSSF bill already, but there could be some more laws that we could explore around social care. In Kenya, for example, and in the Republic of South Africa, they have a law relating to social assistance, the provision to children, to older persons and people with disabilities. It is something that government should look at, and it is something that members of parliament could support. The other core function of parliament, of course, is budgeting. And as you have heard at the inception of SAGE, there were limited funds. I remember in 2012, government was struggling to provide 2 billion at the time as counterpart funding. But along the way, and through your work and a lot of advocacy, at least we are now at 107 billion, which I think is very impressive. So, but you hear this song in and out, especially in your committees, about a limited financing for SAGE and for other social protection interventions. You will hear that even when Parliament appropriates these funds along the way, the release does not match with the expectations in the approved budget. So that would also be another area of continuous engagement, and that is precisely your role. The other one is oversight. Oversight is very important. It is not just enough to appropriate resources for key government programs, but it is also very important that you go to the field, that you go to the program areas and see how they are performing. And the Uganda Parliamentary Reform and Social Protection does offer opportunities for going to the field to see how these government programs that you appropriate money for are doing. The other one is representing constituents' interest, and I think that is equally very important. You have opportunities for matters of national importance. These could be matters in your constituents relating to how some of these social protection programs are being implemented, and asking very specific questions relating to financing, relating to program implementation, and these you could take advantage of. And of course, oral questions for answers, the Prime Minister question time, those would be very important in your role as MP. Ensure that matters that relate to our people, the older person, the children, the women, the youth, and others are kept high on the agenda. So that's the bit of the role of members of parliament regarding advancement of social protection to our citizens. And on that note, I want to hand over to Honorable Chibadia to lead us in a question and answer session that we shall give about 20 minutes. And then I will ask the Honorable Flavia Kabahenda to close this engagement. So Honorable Chibadia, please.
Thank you, Doctor. It's a pleasure that we have the representatives of the two sensitive committees, and Flavia can bear witness. The battle that we had in the last parliament, at least tried to provide some fruits. And I think in this parliament, we shall not have anybody to blame, and we shall not have any reason to transfer any responsibility to any other team if we don't fulfill what the aims and objectives of social protection are. So it's time for discussion. I only need to thank the panelists. I need to thank the presenters. Those presentations have been so good. Mr. Katabazi is still with us everywhere. You will always find him. He's a very, very useful and resourceful as far as this program is concerned. We are opening, but what is key, as they presented, the issue of budgeting, we need to, as we present and as we react, we need to really focus on that line and see how best, because I know the budget committee, even if there was a failure somewhere in the ministerial policy statement, or somewhere when gender is trying and something is failing, budget committee has powers to do something and make sure we move where we are, so that it finds others who are not on the budget committee in the House to legislate and make sure we are there. So this time, let us make it a point that this parliament must not transfer any responsibility to any other parliament that has to come in. We must fulfill what we are supposed to fulfill. We must achieve 100% of the objectives of social protection. Yes, Doctor.
Thank you. It's not working. Okay, it's okay, I think, right? Yeah. I want to thank the previous presenter. First of all, I'm Dr. Patrick Mutono. I represent people of Butembo District is one constituency, and we broke off from Palisa. We're in eastern Uganda. Thank you very much for this forum on social protection. I am personally impressed. This is the first time I attend the meeting on the forum, of the issues that you have highlighted, which are very, very, very crucial for the future of any country, more so for this third world country like Uganda. Now, there are many facets which I've had regarding social protection. I want to limit myself to one, which is nutrition. I'll leave the others, but let me limit myself to the issue of nutrition, which you have brought out eloquently. You brought out the issue of stunted children, talked about 29%. You brought about the effects of being stunted, poor physical growth, of course, poor production, poor cognitive development, and a lot of things which eventually are a national problem in terms of managing that population which didn't which didn't develop well. Now, I may be wrong, but I've not had a clear national policy on nutrition, especially of our children. Now, I want to compare nutrition of our children. I'm not a farmer, but there's those people who farm both crops and animals. When they plant, they make sure they're planting at the right time. There must be rain, or they will irrigate. And they have to, sometimes if they think their soil is poor, they have to include some fertilizer. And of course, they're always happy to see the development of that maize farm or whatever. So I'm wondering, our children, if it was like a maize farm, what would that look like? I probably think they'll be short and pink, and some of them getting maize, or some of them nothing. So definitely the owner of that farm may not be happy about that garden. Now, somehow we gloss over issues of nutrition. The researchers have noted that especially brain development starts at conception, and by 2-3 years it's at maximum, and 4-5 it's almost done. There's another spot later at adolescence, but the crucial ones are conception to 3 years. Now, I have not heard anything about antenatal care in our presentation. Maybe I didn't hear anything. But our mothers, especially in the rural areas, we emphasize a lot about going to the clinics, antenatal care, and that's okay. But we don't talk about the nutrition, because that baby that is developing, nutrition is so critical. Because by the time they are born, the brain already taken a certain trend, depending on what the mother's fed on. And if we don't do something, we've already lost time. And then on top of that, by the time, during that early childhood time, there was a program that came out, early childhood nutrition. But I don't know what happened to it. I don't hear about it anymore. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a doctor. I have, for the last 20 years, I've managed my own hospital in the village. And when I started it, I was confronted with an issue of nutrition. Now, that's the severe type. That is, we usually call it kwashiorkor, protein energy malnutrition, where kids have pink hair, they are bloated, they are, they are not happy. So I was confronted with those issues, and I wondered what to do. So I tried to do some little research briefly, and I went back to the basics. What is wrong with these kids? These kids are lacking protein and energy. Where does that protein come from? Where does that food come from? Usually when we were in school, they showed us a food pyramid. I think we are all have heard of a food pyramid, where at the bottom we have cereals and rice and millet and starch-producing foods, energy. Then the next level we have greens and fruits. Then the next level we have protein. As the pyramid goes smaller, then at the top we have fat. Now, right, okay, in our villages, as mothers come, I want to find out whether we have all these things in our setup. Incidentally, we have everything and even more. have millet, we have rice, we have potatoes, we have beans, we have groundnuts, we have eggs. And as you go up the food pyramid, we have anything. So I tried to find out now what is the problem. I zeroed down on not money, but knowledge of our population in terms of nutrition, of feeding the kids. Feeding a child is different from feeding an adult. Just like people with farms, they know exactly which pesticide, which fertilizer to plant with your maize. They are aware of that. At least they're even ahead in terms of taking care of such things. But with our children, they're totally not aware. They have our cultural norms, which sometimes may not help in terms of nutrition of the children. So I started interviewing the mothers whether, because to a baby to grow, tissues have to expand. And you need protein. Bones, you need protein and calcium. You need a lot of vitamins and so many elements. You need iron. Without iron, they get anemic. So a lot of those things come in, and the children are coming to hospital. And yet we have in our villages all that stuff. So I did a small research. I picked 100 family mothers with purely malnourished children. So we decided to, 2 seconds, to sort of teach them about the foods that we have. One of the things we decided, get one chicken. That chicken should be laying 1 egg a day, and that egg you give to your what? The rest of the chickens you can do whatever, sell. And issues of granules. I realized that over those 100, over 80%, the malnutrition reversed just because of pure knowledge. And the mothers were really shocked that it was all about what? About knowledge. So we need to expand this issue of social protection in terms of nutrition, and all starting from antenatal care. So maybe as you answer a question, I would like to hear what coherent policy is there to address this problem as regards of our population. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Colleagues, we have 15 minutes to close this discussion. So let's be mindful of time. You use 1 minute, straight to the point. I could not stop Doctor because we brought a topic where he is specialized, but just 1 minute and we move.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Lambert, for your fantastic presentation. It's also my first time to attend this. I think I've been emboldened and provided a great knowledge. Maybe 3 comments. One, is your measure of child vulnerability or social vulnerability, you talked about cash only. In Africa, very few people are in the money economy. We look at other aspects like food in the homes. Would you be able to extend your tools to include food as well? The second one is you have identified the vulnerable groups that needs social protection very well. And one of them is actually the elders under SAGE. We've been very successful with that. When I was campaigning, I've realized that you limited the numbers, the age group to about what? 80. These people are dying now at 80. So why don't we reduce the age to 60 and then expand that? As Parliament, as Budget Committee, I'm a member of Budget Committee, we'll be willing to give more money so that you broaden SAGE. Make one project that you've taken very successful. Is already successful. Broaden that so that we see it. And of course, the other aspect is you've talked about our funding to social security, being social protection, being still less than 1%. 0.7%. So come up with appropriate policies to cover some of the vulnerable groups so that as Parliament we can continue to appropriate enough money so that maybe as social protection as a percentage of GDP can go to 2% or more. I would recommend for you to do that. Then you've not talked about child labor, child protection. There are very many kids there who are being abused. Maybe we need policies around that as well. And of course, finally, I have so many to say, but we don't have time. One of the things that Dr. Mutoro talked about, which is around food, Malawi made it compulsory. I was in Malawi for 3 years. I was the banking executive there. Malawi made it sure that every family, if you are a family of 4 or 5, each person must have 4 bags of maize attributed to one member of the family. So if you're 5 in a family, you must have 20 bags for kaunga as a matter of food security. Why don't we come with appropriate policies to make sure that our children have food? And during colonial days and post-colonial period, the British made it compulsory for our parents to produce, to at least have 2 gardens of cotton. It was a must. And we also make something so that fathers and mothers are forced to make sure there is food for the children. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and colleagues. I think I want to thank the presenters, but honorable colleagues, I recommend a paradigm shift where we should move away from the boardrooms to the ground. Why I'm saying this, when we are measuring the Human Development Index, we are talking about quality of life, we are talking of life expectancy, but I think down, like the presenter David said, I travel from Kampala to Arua. But what tickles my mind is how many vehicles are carrying cargo, how many vehicles are carrying produce. When I'm traveling from here to Busia, you find that I think that's what we need to do. What I'm saying here is that, one, the boardroom should be for strategy. We identify the strategy like we are here. What are the policy gaps? And after all, we are here to legislate. Tell us what are those key constraining variables in terms of policy so that we can take on them. But suffice to mention, we should really move and ensure that we are role models. Let's lead by example. A case in point, I think Chairman has visited me, Honorable Kibalia. What I do is to ensure that at least as a legislator, I should be in the garden and these peasants should actually see. I should ensure that at least I'm the source of input. If they are talking of mangoes, I should actually give them. Then actually, when we do this, if they are talking of Popeye, I should be able to raise for them. If you are talking of fingerlings, I should be able to raise for them. So that at least they have access. You see, when we wait for government programs, I think we shall not be able to catch up. But if you have to bridge this gap of nutrition, income enhancement, I think that's what we need to do. And Mr. Chairman and colleagues, we should actually be role models, have what to show, so that at least the population can copy. When we do that, I think we shall achieve it in the shortest time possible. I thank you.
The first issue has been raised. It was about lowering the age limit, which I won't again talk about it. Mr. David talked about, he informed us that poverty causes irreversible damage. And currently, we have been affected by COVID, whereby most young girls have got unwanted pregnancies. And this one means that it's going to lead them to hate their children and they won't take good care of them. And this is the time when these young children need exclusive breastfeeding and care so that they can develop very well. I foresee a need for us to focus on advocating for psychosocial support for these young girls so that they are able to accept their children, because I can imagine most of them, the fathers are not there. It's the grandparents who could be there. even who are not able to take care of them. So if we do not focus on these young girls, we might end up getting a very big problem in future. So I pray that as we legislate, let us legislate in that line. Thank you.
Encourage members to state their names so that the presenter can be able to capture them.
I'm called Irene Linda, woman MP for Poto.
Thank you, moderator. Dr. Sime Florence Akiki, woman MP, Masindi District, commonly known as the Dancing Queen. I'm here with the artist also. Anyway, Sage. I'm on Sage. I wanted to see in the presentation how we are faring. I've heard that actually this program is highly funded by the development partners, and my government is supposed to contribute a certain percentage. How sustainable is this program? And I hear that the partners will soon pull out. How sustainable is this program when the donors pull out? It's good the budget committee is here. We are having a lot of cutting in the budget. So we need to devise ways on how we are going to actually sustain SAGE amidst the withdrawal of the funders. How can we include this program in the parish model that is going to be implemented by our government? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's my name, Silas Augon, MP Kumi Municipality, Independent. One, I'd love to appreciate the chairperson of the forum. Thank you for the great job. And colleagues, you'll allow me to thank Honorable Flavia for having sustained this forum properly. She has understood it, and that's why it's moving on well. To move us from 7 billion or so to 107 via government releases is not a joke. It's not a joke. So for me, I don't want to take it for granted. Any serious forum needs is serious leadership. And I think that's where we need to start in the 11th Parliament. We must sustain serious leadership. Allow me to applaud the technocrats, Patrick and David. Thanks a lot for the insights. You have done such a great job. My feeling is that I do not have enough time to speak on the way forward. So if you can allow me to say something now. One, the presenter, David, talked about the healthcare, disabilities, early childhood, sicknesses, unemployment, and so on. I have a feeling that we need to reconverge beyond this meeting so that we study these aspects in detail and we extract the challenges. And that should be able to drive us towards our legislative agenda for the 11th Parliament. I say so because I have a feeling that's where the whole thing lies. In terms of motions that we want to present in Parliament, what is that special motion that we want to bring on board? Petitions. If we're asking questions, on what? If it's the issue of budgeting, where are the champions? That drives me to ask, from the convergence here, how many members so far have registered with this forum? I say so because we need champions. Those champions are the ones to stand for us. They are the ones to move the motions. They are the ones to help on issues of petitions. They are the ones to ask the technical questions on the floor. They are also the ones to ask questions during the Prime Minister's question time. So it is my feeling that it is only very important we now build our team by having members registered officially, and we start from there. So that, Chair, we maintain a team that will get to understand social protection properly. Moreover, there is an issue here. Yes, government recently helped people with the money, 100,000, the Nabanja money. But I can tell you, we do not have a mature social protection mechanism established by government, of which I feel we need to move a motion on the floor of Parliament, urging government to do that exactly. Not only on issues of SAGE, but for the rest. I want to thank you. And Chair, if you allow, we need another meeting urgently. Identify the challenges, identify our legislative agenda, take it to the office of the Speaker so that they know what we're about to do, what we are going to do, what we want to do, and what should be done by us. Thank you so much for God and my country.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair and the colleagues. I want to thank the presenter and the issue of the issue we are talking about. I want to bring out is a cross-cutting issue, but because the budget committee is here and also the forum is concerned with social protection, then we can talk about it. In the presentation, Mr. Mwesige, if I'm not mistaken, David talked about, said that if we don't invest in human capital, if we don't invest in education, we shall miss out on the human capital. But when we talk about it and all of us are here, maybe we need also to lobby others. We should look at our children. They say, at least say, the elderly can get the 20,000, but when you look at the education, we have a budget of the grant of 10,000 per child in primary per year. So that means about 3,000 per term. Colleagues, don't you think we need to sound a bell or to bring out our voice so that that money can be increased? Can a child work on, use 3,000 a year? Because we know how much as legislators, we know the value of money. And when we talk about it, we know the effect. If you had 10,000, it's like you don't have anything. Even your voters, some of them, like mine, 10,000, you cannot give them 10,000. So we should think through if we are advocating for these people, for everybody, because we want a better future. I thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, David. I liked it when you talked about child poverty. And given your experience, the global experience in issues to do with child poverty, I wanted you to share with us 2 or 3 things that you think our country, Uganda, can do to match with other countries elsewhere that have addressed the issue of child poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm called Peg Joy Wako, representing old persons. I'm sorry I came in late, but I've heard you mentioning something about SAGE, and my interest is on SAGE. First of all, I don't know whether my points have been covered, but all the same, let me repeat them in case they have been covered. Now, when NIRA was registering for the first time, mobilization was very poor. People didn't understand why they were being registered, especially the old people. Many of them missed out, and those who registered didn't give their exact years. And now when this program of SAGE came in, many of them have missed out. They're already 80 years plus, but they registered less years. Now they cannot meet or get that small allowance the government is giving out. So there is a lot of outcry in the villages there, and many of them keep ringing us, see how we can assist them. Then another thing on SAGE, this 8 years plus, when you go to see, there are very few now people who are in 8 years who can benefit from this fund. The majority are less. And those who can benefit who are 8 years, many of them are very sickly and they cannot reach the paying points. Yet, when these people are going out to pay, they are strictly told that somebody must come in person and sign for himself or herself. So many of them miss out because even if they are 80, they cannot reach the paying points. Another thing is this, the 20,000 the government is paying out. Surely, compare the 20,000 with the living standards of our country today. What can the 20,000 do? One has to hire a bike, a border, take him to the paying station, and the border man wants 20,000. Yet, he's going to get 20,000. I think that one also should be considered. I was of the view, I hope we shall succeed if the age can be brought down. If they cannot put it back at 60, at least let it be 65 or 70, so that many of our old people can also enjoy the fruits of their country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Respond to the few questions, then Patrick will lead by the-
Thank you very much, honorable members. I will respond to competent to answer the financing issues. A few months ago, I would have been on the phone to my boss or the PS asking how much money is there. I don't know the actual numbers, but I'm sure Patrick is quite engaged with that. So he will answer the questions about SAGE financing and access. But these are actually fundamental issues. So let me start from the beginning by appreciating the brilliant comments and explanation from Dr. Patrick Mutoro, Honorable. You did a very good job to amplify the message on nutrition because, you know, it's the foundation of life, right from conception. So I agree with you. It's something we must do. And I wanted to respond to your point about the issue of knowledge. Save the Children globally is now renowned for its cash plus approach. We believe that cash, and this has been researched, there's a lot of evidence. Basically, I'm sure that's part of the study, that evidence includes the study you did, that cash is more effective if it's complemented with behavioral change communication. So in fact, the program I talked about, the Child Sensitive Social Protection Program in West Nile, which is implemented by WFP, is recruiting Save the Children to manage the behavioral change communication component, and we are doing this all over the world. It's kind of our flagship entry point. Because, in fact, child sensitivity is also defined as enhancing the nutritional aspects of our social protection programming. You wanted to know about the policy. I did not talk about UNAP2, the Uganda National Action Plan on Nutrition. It's recently been approved by the Prime Minister, I believe, sometime in June, and it does actually provide for a framework for how the country can enhance nutrition. And social protection, of course, is one of the tools. There are several other. I think nutrition has been mainstream because I also know there is a national nutrition policy, but also there is a national early childhood development, I think, action plan. I did mention, but because of time, I didn't explain it a lot. Most of that information is available. I'll be happy to share it. Honorable Member, you did not mention your name, but Honorable Omara, you wanted to know whether cash or cash and food. Cash is king. The evidence we've seen globally suggests that if you give people money, they will buy food. So from a social protection point of view, you give them cash. But food security doesn't come from cash alone. Food security comes from agriculture production, because you also need to be able to guarantee supply. So cash gives you access, but you have to have supply of food. So families also need to be food secure in addition to being income secure. So it's a combination of both, but there's a very clear niche for social protection in terms of smoothening income security. Of course, if you live in the urban centers, it's really cash. Now, the question is, should you distribute food or cash? WFP, Save the Children, all the global humanitarian agencies are now moving to cash because it's faster to deliver. People decide what to use it for. Even vouchers, they are not necessary. Like, there's no evidence that they would make a big difference. So unless you're controlling for specific things like inflation, cash is sufficient. But of course, it's context specific. I love the idea that you can reduce the age of SCG eligibility, because our child-sensitive assessment, which we are launching, by the way, and here's an invitation. On the 19th of November, we are going to launch a child sensitivity analysis report that we conducted at Save the Children together with the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. And one of the recommendations is that you should reduce the age of the SCG, the Senior Citizens Grant or SAGE, because if you do that, you reach more people. And we know that the most vulnerable children live in these older persons' households. We also know that it will take time to have a child benefit. But in the meantime, we can make swifter progress. It's a low-hanging fruit, would achieve a lot, would help with the recovery, would help a lot of old people who have extra costs now because of the restrictions imposed by COVID. It's harder to go to hospitals. So reducing that would really be a powerful thing and empowering for these people. The policies are there. We just need to implement them. I like your idea of expanding coverage, spending to 2% of GDP. The Ministry of Gender's vision aims for 1.5. We actually don't need to spend 2%. 1.5 is enough to cover in a gradual way. The point is, start now with a few, like child disability grant, which they've said they want to do a disability grant, but move to covering more children and enhancing the child sensitivity of the program. Child labor, there was a question about child labor. I did not talk about it, but of course, social protection helps to address child labor. It's one of the most researched areas. It's one of the most documented impacts of cash, that it reduces child labor, because then parents don't need to use their children to earn an extra income, especially in times of crisis. In fact, you talked about your work in Malawi. The first social protection scheme I heard of that was researched in Africa was called the Michinji Cash Transfer Pilot in Malawi. And of course, they also SAVE is working in Malawi. In fact, my colleague is just moved there. Food security is important to them. Honorable Vyakatonda, you're absolutely spot on. We need to lead by example. There are so many good programs on food security and livelihoods enhancement, but the point of social protection is that it enables people to access, it grants access. The purpose of social protection is to reduce the demand side barriers, the demand side constraints to access, either to food or nutrition, or to health services, including maternal, because someone talked about antenatal care. There are costs associated with accessing these services. So if we can combine cash plus with antenatal care, absolutely, that's how we will lead to better human capital. And I think I can combine that with the point that Honorable Ravsheja Margaret raised, yes, we need to enhance this funding for education because I showed you it's one of the lowest. We spend more on security than education. So, absolutely a very important point. These choices are not binary. We have to get the right combination. In economics, it's called optimization. You know, when you have 100,000, you need to decide what to put on your car and what you don't say, I only have for your car. You have to balance, and that's what we need to do with our budget. Honorable Linda, yes, psychosocial support is important. In fact, Uganda's policy acknowledges social care services. The Ministry of Gender, I'm aware, has developed a social care framework which defines the scope of work that needs to be done here. They are working on a social care workforce strategy with development partners. So once this strategy I talked about is ready, I think we'll be able to invest significantly in this. Honorable Asimwe Florence, you raise an important point, but I want to assure you, the graph I showed was showing that government funding, if I can go back, in 2011, government was contributing 500 million shillings to the program, while donors were providing so much more when SAGE was still a pilot. Now, government, I think, is spending more than 80% of the cost of the SAGE program. So that's a lot of progress. That's why I wanted you, honorable members, to clap for yourselves, because in the region, only I think Kenya has done that. So we are really trailblazers in that area. So SAGE is actually sustainable. We can do these things. We've built Entebbe Expressway. We've built the Ginger Bridge. We built Karuma Dam. There's nothing we can't do if we have the political will to do it. It can be done. We can make this country a better place. Thank you so much, Honorable Aogon. I know you're a champion. That's what's needed. I told you, beyond my family, this is my purpose. And if you can join us, we can make this country different. I can tell you, it's not just hard work. That's what the Special Rapporteur on Poverty was saying. We should stop, stigmatizing people and saying, poor people, they work the hardest. But if we help people invest in their children, education, nutrition, access to health, then they will be able to do all the things we want them to do. Honorable Joy Wakol, you were asking about access to pay points. Yes, that's an important point. I'm sure Patrick can respond to that, as well as the value of the SCG. The last time I checked, I think the SAGE had already lost more than 50% of its value, because 25% is where we started at 22,000 in 2011. It was increased, I believe, in 2013, and it's stagnated since then. But of course, we were trying to reach more people. Now we've reached more people. We know the value of these investments. We have a crisis. We can use this program as part of the recovery. So I totally support you on enhancing the value of the grant, on guaranteeing access, because it's a right of these people. And absolutely, these are the things we need to be doing. I think I did not answer, I think I answered Honorable Vyakatonda. I think that's all I wanted to comment about. So thank you very much, honorable members, for this opportunity. We are counting on you to change Uganda's course. We can become a middle-income country if we invest in our children and our people. Thank you.
Yes, most of the questions, I think David has answered them. I want to make a few comments on SAGE. Yes, SAGE has been a very hot topic in Parliament on the account that we started from a very difficult situation where government was struggling to meet its counterpart obligations in 2012. But then, as you have heard, this has improved to 107 billion, and about 32 billion less of what ordinarily would be the ultimate requirement. And that's an area for continuous engagement, because even when you have a balance of about 32, 38 billion, once it is not provided, it means that there are some districts that may delay to get payments. You have heard of scenarios where several months pass when older persons have not received their money. So it is an area that the Committee on Gender needs to be very firm on, and of course working with the Committee on Budget to see that for the budgetary requests that are made in respect of the current implementation plan, that the same be provided as they are, because in any case, this money is going straight to the older person. The sustainability question, I think, is in part being answered, because as it is right now, financing for SAGE is purely government of Uganda. The donors have phased out their contribution, and it is government of Uganda that is financing all that. And we still think the commitment so far to provide 107 reflects the commitment, but also the fact that within Uganda's budgetary means, this is sustainable. We just need to put in some little bit of effort. The challenges brought forth by NIRA are very evident to everybody, but also more painful for older persons, because at least for them, you need a national ID in order to access a payment. Some of us have issues with our NIRA cards, but because there is no urgent requirement to produce it for a benefit, maybe it is not as serious as it is for older persons. And that's where NIRA needs to be called upon, ensure that there is a specific intervention targeting older persons. Because if the NIRA records are not very clear for older persons, it limits enrollment on the program at various levels. There are those who are eligible today, there are those who are eligible tomorrow. So if the system is not very clear, then this whole program on SAGE might be thrown into paralysis. So it is something that Honorable Chair, Committee on Gender, Labour and Social Development, it is a matter that you need to take on very seriously so that we see together, working together, advocating to see that this is resolved as soon as possible. And I would, of course, encourage MPs representing older persons to work very closely with us so that we amplify advocacy regarding this issue. On the issue of the value of the grant, as David has indicated, it started at 22,000. There was an adjustment that was made 25. And in last year's modeling, we had recommended, as part of the last Parliament's advocacy, we had recommended a revision to 30,000. I know that is certainly not also very, very sufficient, but we need to see progression, taking into account inflation movement and many other considerations that are taking place. So it is something that, again, we need also drum up support in terms of advocacy, ensure that at least this goes up to 30,000 in our initial modeling of last financial year. So it is something that we can debate on. Honorable Mara talked about the issue of food. I want to supplement what David was saying. I also wanted to say that we have community-based social protection mechanisms where members of the community, members of the wider family make contributions. So in essence, we would need to value them and also attach a value in our calculation of the social protection interventions that we have. The challenge that we see with our community approaches is that over time, our social structure has broken down because of the rural-urban migration that is happening, because of the many challenges that we are seeing in our communities. So people are focusing more on their own as individuals rather than the community the way it used to be. So that's why you see that you have many older persons being abandoned as children go to towns. And in fact, by the way, giving them a burden of having children mothered or fathered in the cities and then sending them back to older persons without any means of additional support. So our social structure has somewhat broken down because of the economic challenges that we are seeing, but then also because of the influences that are attributed to our participation in the global market. So that's why it is important that is recorded, but our future for social protection for the vulnerable lies more on systems that we need to put in place that do not rely heavily on the goodwill of people, but rather on the issue of guaranteeing a right to members of the community. So I thought I could respond to that. We are still together. The last, possibly I would comment on Honorable Cyrus. We would welcome members of parliament to join the forum. There are forms at the exit on the table. Enlist and become part of us. There are many capacity building programs that have been lined up, and there are also some field visits that are being lined up between now and December, and we think those would provide a clear-cut and practical learning experiences on the aspect of social protection interventions that are being implemented in Uganda and the gaps that they are in, and those that we could possibly fill using your respective offices and mandates. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And I think nearly all has been said. Before I invite Honorable Flavia, I know Honorable Flavia will slightly hint something small on where we are and where we want to be. But we had that part of the way forward. Among the few things I believe Gloria has noted some, among the few areas that were noted as way forward. One, we need to change the part of having 0.7 of our GDP to be spent on social development and instead take it up. It's at the lowest end. We need to take it up, because if we change this, then the life will change for the rest of the community. Two, then, as Cyrus pointed out about the champions, we already have 5 members of MPs representing the older persons. I know those ones are key champions of this because it concerns them directly, and it's one of the areas that we need to. Honorable Santa, you are welcome. Flavia will introduce you later. And I think that is an area, or the persons, one of the reasons why the president was insisting that we have MPs representing older persons was that their interests were not being represented well. Now, this is the time to see their interests represented and really championed and brought out in the open day light so that everybody can see. Cyrus equally pointed about having another engagement concerning, I believe, Patrick, we shall have another meeting where we shall invite more members of budget committee and gender. It's not that other committees are not part of the struggle, but there are areas we are moving towards the budget period. So we need them to appreciate the whole program so that by the time we visit their committees, to really tell them what we want to do and how we need money in the budget, they're in position to know where we are coming from and what we are saying so that we can move together on the same page. As another way forward, the MP for older persons also pointed out about the age group, 80. It was a struggle in the last parliament, but colleagues who were there know where it came from and why it was so. Originally, there was an issue. But I think given that now government has come in full board, it can be easier, because the other time government was imagining it could not be possible. But now I know, given that even our own is the chair of the gender committee, I know we shall reduce the age where we want, because all of you know that looking for somebody of 85 years or 90 or 81 in your village, the environment has properly kicked them out. Now that even COVID has come, really the conditions are tough that they can no longer handle. Most of those people are dead, so we can't have a group that we are looking after which is not existing. So we need to look into the age and see how best we can move. Somebody talked about also having in mind the issue of the girl child. It's an area that I know our secretariat has noted, and we shall We shall see how best we can look into that. The MP for also older persons talked about the mess up in the yards. It's an area, those older persons didn't take it as a serious, they didn't know what it meant to have the right age. Others were not even bothered, others could not even remember. So most of them have missed on that money, but it's an area equally that we can address and see how best we can help them and move as we are supposed to move. I need to invite Honorable Flavia to say the closing remarks. It's the age that I've talked of on the identity cards. The fingerprints are not reflected. And more especially now that everybody washing hands using soap and sanitizers, even rubbed some of these, your fingerprints can no longer read as it were. It's equally an area that the Secretariat can take a note of. We need to address it. Honorable Babadiri has something to say before Flavia comes in. She's the representative for the Northern region. Give her the microphone.
Thank you very much to our presenters. I would like to add something very small and see if we can be recommended into those who have included. One, regarding the older person's vulnerability, it is caused by us. At the beginning, when we are starting work, we don't think about our old age. In developed countries, they think of a pension right from the time they start work. Even from the age of 18, they think of what will happen at their old age in the beginning contributing. But for us, this thing is just left only for those who are working, for those who, like in NSSF, those who are working. But I think it's important for our people to know that they must begin serving right from the time they begin working. And if it's possible, we should extend this contributory pension right to those who are not employed formally. So that if it means by force, like paying taxes, say this money, at least 5,000 a year, must be saved for your old age. So that by the time you reach that time, you have that money. Because for us, we're investing on our children, hoping that when they're educated, they will give us something. But we have realized that they don't. Once they're married, they forget about you. So we need to plan early enough, sensitize our people, and if possible, put a law to ensure that you contribute something for your old age right from the beginning. Because we spend money luxuriously, drinking, having women as many as possible when you are still strong. By the time you reach at old age, you have nothing. So I think we need to extend it so that everybody has this contributory pension, and we have a better life when we are old. Then one example is in Parliament, we never had this contributory pension. Those who left in 2001, 2011, they went into really poverty. You have nothing. You have spent all your money for campaigns. Even you sold your houses for campaigns, and you fail on top. You have nothing. That's why we thought of that contributory pension, which is helping us. At least now, if I go out, I have something to rely on, to spend on. So it is important to sensitize people so that we start early enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Babadi. Patrick has noted that. Cyrus, you have something to say again?
I felt it was very, very important that before we bring on board the new interventions, let's first have a drive to realize the deficit. The 32 billion, we didn't get it. So even before we talk about reducing the age and increasing the money, can we first cover the deficit? I thought it is something we should also capture in the way forward. Thank you.
you have noted the issue of Cyrus. Cyrus has said we have a deficit. Originally, the Minister of Gender, by then, Honorable Janet Mukwe, was saying we don't have money as a government. So they were worried of where money would come from. Now, if we make a drive and realize the deficit of 32 billion, then we shall be in a position to tell them that this thing is possible. After making sure everything is ready, now we fight to reduce the age. We first fight to have the gap covered, then we bring another battle to reduce the age. If we begin a battle of reducing the age before we have covered the other gap, they will tell us that we have even failed to cover this. Now you are pushing us to this. Yes, the microphone is there.
I wanted your eyes to see me. That's why I stood up. I was just emphasizing what he said. Now, for us, we are first timers in Parliament, but we have experienced what the such thing did to the elderly persons in our communities. So, if there was a budget shortfall, I think that can be considered within the push of going to beyond 1% of GDP. So if you have one project which is doing very well, why don't we capitalize on that? Let's cover the gap, increase the number, we reduce the age to 60, and we see what numbers that would be. Yes, then you come to Parliament and say, let's fund this thing 100%. Personally, I would be there. I'm not a very simple person. I have my friends who in the budget committee who will be able to mobilize and provide that money. So what we want from you is an initiative. This thing we are telling you, cover the gap, reduce the number to 60, and we have the justification for reduction of age. The 80, the 85 are dead. You don't deal with the numbers, people you don't have. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So his idea is let us first agree on reducing the age, then we push for the gap at once. Is that right? Kindly give a microphone to Honorable Santa to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Chair. I want to first apologize because of coming late. It was due to some other unforeseen engagement earlier before this. Now, my name is Santa Alum, Member of Parliament representing Oyam District and the Secretary General for this forum. Allow me now, the last bit of the engagement, I think our Secretariat and the Chair, Gender, needs to come up and help us in this. Because I remember the way we struggled to get all the districts on board. And the argument of the Honorable Minister, by then Honorable Saida Bumba, was that there is no money which can cater for the entire elderly from the age 65. We were even dealing with 65, not 60. So for me, I would ask our Secretariat and the Chair Budget to sit down, because I don't want us to try and then we even lose everything. So, you know, the Budget Committee is strong, so that you informed us which approach should we really, should we reduce the number to 60, for example, and we increase the amount of money? Shall we be successful? Just food for thought for the mind. Thank you.
Okay, I think Honorable Chair of the session, we did modeling. So we did modeling, which we have, that we shall share formally. We now know that if we target 60, these are how many people per the census report that we can cover, and this is how much money that we would need. So we'll provide that. And then you, the policymakers, will look through and pick the most appropriate decision that you can make. Thank you. Yes, we have them. It was the case that because originally we had 65, but in the 15 pilot districts. Those are some of the numbers that we put forward. And at the time, the Parliament resolution was that let's have this, and within 5 years, which ordinarily would be about 2024, that government would have slowly covered up to 65. So, Honorable Santa, there's a government commitment that every year to review the age downwards so that many people can be targeted. So I think we can still hold government accountable on its own promise regarding that progressive realization to 65. Thank you.
Honorable Flavia.
You can, once you can, yes. Yep.
The honorable members of Parliament sitting on the Committee of Gender and those honorable members sitting on the Committee of Budget, the technical people from Parliament, the Executive Committee of Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, the staff of Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kabahenda Flavia Rwabhoro. I represent the people of Kyegegwa District. I am the committee chairperson for the Committee on Gender, Labor and Social Development, and I am the advocacy advisor for the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. I will plead with you to understand me when I cross from being the chair, talking as chairperson of committee, to somehow talk as member of UPFSP. I will struggle to stay in the line because I'm supposed to speak here as the committee chairperson. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection for organizing this meeting. This is one of the noble meetings we should always have when we discuss about the people, because me, I love the people. And I know that whatever we do as a country, we do it for the people. So we cannot love what we do for the people more than the people for whom we do it. And that is the reason why I want to really stand with Lambert. We can do all the roads, we can do all the electricity, we can do every infrastructure. But for as long as we don't respect those for whom we do them, then we miss a point. That is when even the people we are doing these things for will never understand us. And so I want to really thank you for organizing this meeting. And I pray that it really switches on our brains to start understanding how we must invest in the people more than we invest in objects. Honorable members, Uganda is signed into a number of protocols. The ILO, the African Union Charter, the SDGs, the NDP3, the Vision 2020, the NRM Manifesto, and others, like you can think about them. The International Covenant on Cultural and Social Rights is one of them. And it has ratified these protocols, and it has committed to achieving them, and it must even account to the other member states on how it is progressing. We are here to build blocks for social protection systems. And all these documents I have talked about provide a substantial framework from which we can begin designing, implementing, and monitoring social protection systems from a rights-based approach. When we talk about a rights-based approach, we are talking about the life cycle. And therefore, the honorable member who was worried about antenatal, we are talking about a life cycle approach that tracks a person from the time that person drops into your womb up to when that person dies. That is what they call a system. And we as members of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, just piloted with SAGE. And therefore, I would like to tell you that social protection does not equal to SAGE. SAGE is just a component of the social protection aspects that we are supposed to oversee as members of parliament. So the convention, the ILO convention number 102 and also 202, compel a state responsibility. That the state has the overall responsibility to guarantee the proper administration of a social protection system, including ensuring financial sustainability, like the doctor was asking, and also to ensure that benefits are duly provided, minimum social protection requirements, and this was the biggest achievement of the 20th century. We cannot come out of it. Government is supposed to ensure sustainability, financial sustainability. So I don't know whether we want to sympathize with government or we want to put government to task to live to what is expected of it. And that is why we need the actual set of policies and programs designed to reduce poverty and vulnerability by promoting efficient labor markets, reducing people's exposure to shocks, and enhancing their capacity to protect themselves against hazards and loss of incomes. For social cohesion and inclusion and a dignified citizenry, we need a social protection system. We need to target appropriately. I will tell you, targeting older persons using identity cards, which you know are flawed. Honorable Dr. Sim, I want to tell you, it is not that the older person's thumbs could not be read by their biometric machines. These were fake. If their thumbs are read by the machines at the banks, why did these ones not read them? They were substandard machines, and we need to speak to that. We need to tell NIRA to improve up their game. And so, you cannot now tag identity cards to the targeting of older persons. And I want to bring good news at this, that NIRA has written to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Gender to waiver the use of national IDs to target the older persons. And well, yes, I would clap, but not much. Why can't it do across board? Because we can't use national IDs to target vulnerable persons, and that is why the Nabanza money did not actually go to the vulnerable, because the vulnerable don't have the IDs. The vulnerable are the ones whose IDs had been written mistaken age and mistaken names, and they could not rectify it, so they missed out. Honorable Chiaga will tell you what happened with the artists. How was the money distributed? The artists are one of those people who benefited from a relief fund, but I don't know whether it was the artists of Kampala or the artists of somewhere. I don't just understand it, because you know that there were very, very many loopholes in even every relief money that was given everywhere. Why? Because we don't have a system. We don't have utilizable data. Up to now, the Ministry of Gender will tell you they don't know the amount of older persons who are eligible. And it's a shame. We don't even have the populations of our children. Who has seen a birth certificate recently for a child in this country? What kind of country are we in that does not even want to own their children? We are in shame. I mean, these are their IDs. They would be given wherever they take birth or at the sub-county chief's place. But it is not being done. So we are just running a country where whoever is in front will take, whoever is behind won't take. And as members of parliament, I think I need you to note that we have a number of questions to ask in as far as that is concerned. Of course, without preempting anything, NSSF amendments intend to widen and expand its scope to include voluntary savers, and this is intended to reduce informalities so that people can declare their incomes and people can save from their incomes. And secondly, it intends to enhance benefits, widen the scope of benefits from medical and invalidity, and that discretion is being given to the minister. And of course, it is intending to offer midterm access because that is the talk of the day. Of course, this is just fire brigading. We need a system at the end of the day, and many others. But I think in the very near future, we shall be concluding this on the floor of Parliament. The committee has done its job. We are almost there. And I want to think that we don't have very much time for it to be on the floor. And so I want to allay the fears of all the people out there that it is delaying. It was because we were trying to refine it as to speak to the people and not necessarily to the money. For us, we are looking at the people and how they should live a dignified life. Someone talked about cohesion and inclusion. I think it was Lambert. I think you see the animosity now that is in the country. When a cyclist knocks a motorist and then they fight and at the end of the day both are dead, it's because of those kind of differences that people see. Because when someone who is a cyclist sees you riding a UBK that you bought just last week, you know the animosity that comes. Recently, if you have watched news, when people go to someone's house and arm a man at that, and then they put it on fire to burn him and his wife in and the children, you can imagine the animosity that the differences in income and standards of living is bringing. All of us are going to be hunted because people now think we owe them a living because they cannot be badly off, and for us, we are up here. So we need to think now, or else each one of us will have to get an armored car if we are not careful. And so the idea of social protection and a system that is going to address people's vulnerabilities and shocks should be the talk now and not tomorrow, because it is very paramount. And we know that close to 4 million children live with older persons of 60 and above. Close to 4 million children. So when we talk about lowering the age eligibility, then it means we are trapping more children into the net for support with social protection. Of course, I would love that we learn to link interventions of social protection in order to construct a system. One time, we went to meet the PSST, the former PSST, and the budget officer in the Ministry of Finance. And of course, they were asking questions of sustainability on SAGE. But how are we going to sustain this? You know now, people are living up to 63, so we are going to get very many older persons, and how will we sustain it? And then I looked at them. I asked myself, are you students of economics? Because you can't introduce youth livelihood support, and you introduce UWEP, and you introduce a PWD grant, and you cannot even link that as a means of creating resilience to the effect that by the time these people are old, they will not need SAGE. You see, in this country, we just operate on projects. So they think YLP has no relationship to SAGE. They think UWEP has no relationship to SAGE. And yet, if we strengthened these, then these people, when they grow old, they wouldn't love SAGE. They would be already resilient. They would be standalone. And if we don't learn that as a country, then we are going to continue to pick and play. And I love when the doctor says, can we link this to PDM, SAGE to parish model? But it was not even linked to EMIOGA. There was no OMWOGA for older persons. Was it there? No, it wasn't. There was OMWOGA for women entrepreneurs. There were youths. There were everybody. There were no older persons in any of the enterprises of EMIOGA. So I don't know how we want to link it to PDM. Even when PDM is talking about agribusiness, agriculture, and you know that the older persons don't even have the energy to do agriculture. Nevertheless, we should be, at the back of our minds, we should know that close to 60% of the land in the country belongs to older persons. And that is the reason why the younger people are fighting to clear them out so that they can grab land for free. But otherwise, most of the land in this country belongs to older persons. And therefore, linking them to PDM would be a good thing if there were people who think like that. And of course, linking interventions, the National Social Protection Policy that is being reviewed now is making social protection everybody's business, from the family. From the family. It is very, very easy for a parent to raise his or her 15 children, one parent. But it is very difficult for the 15 children to look after their one parent. I don't know what happened, what went wrong. I just don't know. Maybe scientists. You know, I'm an artist. Maybe scientists. Can you give us an explanation to that? That one parent can raise his or her children 15, 10, 15, and those children cannot even support their one parent. And that is where we all fall out. I think all of us have fallen short of the glory of God when it comes to that. And therefore, the National Social Protection emphasizes the family intervention on social protection, looking after people with disabilities, all the people that are vulnerable in our families, including, but not limited to, the older persons. We need utilizable data. The single registry this time must be financed. Honorable members sitting on the budget committee, we have a single registry that was launched 2015. It has no utilizable data at all. And so all that comes because there is no financing for it. It has not been operationalized. And so when we come with such a request that there must be money and the single registry must not be pushed to the unfunded priorities, this is what we mean. When we don't have data in every sector, no data of farmers, no data of animals, no data of older persons, no data of children, no data of women, then I think we are running a country on some system that I wouldn't want to mention now. Of course, honorable members, I would like to implore you that as we have SAGE in all our districts and constituencies, can you please link SAGE to the district development programs? What stops the district health officer from sending some health workers to a pay point so that they can take the pressure and diabetes of these older persons as they sit to wait for money? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with an agriculturist going to tell these older persons how they should feed, what kind of diet they require now at that age, what they should not be taking, what they should take, and many others? The commercial officers can even interest them in a small circle, that even out of 25,000, you can save your 5,000 and then try to use it later or try to use it as a bigger amount. So I would like that all your talks, either on radios or whatever you are in public, link SAGE to the district development programs so that these older persons are assisted to understand and be educated on how to live a dignified life. Otherwise, members, I would also add my voice to the other members who are calling on all of us to become members of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. I'm glad that there is a list from where we can enlist ourselves. And don't worry, we are not those who are going to start scrapping your money as immediately you write. You just commit to us that you'll be a member and subscribe. Our subscription fee is only 30,000, but at your consent, because when you don't consent, of course, we can't even move on to tap on it. Otherwise, members and the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, I thank you for inviting us here, for reminding us that this belongs to us, the discussion on social protection, and the budgeting period coming. will find us alive to the matter, and we shall do whatever it takes to ensure that we build a system, building blocks for a social protection system. I thank you very much for listening to me, and I would like to announce that the Committee on Gender, Labor and Social Development will sit in the conference hall B at 2 p.m. Thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and as you go, don't stop thinking about a social protection system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Flavia. I don't wish to have an oversight where maybe the chairperson of budget committee delegated somebody. When we didn't see him in the room, we imagined he had not delegated anybody. Could there be somebody who has been delegated by the chairperson budget committee? That's why we invited the one who was last. Okay. Because we don't want to be reported. Somebody can go back and say, you left me there, but they didn't even give me a chance to give some comment. Thank you. After the closing remarks by the chairperson, I wish to equally thank you for coming and wish you a blessed day.